And Macharia Munene, Professor of International Relations at the United States International University, has been helping us pick through some of the major events and milestones around these elections. He joins us from Nairobi, Kenya. Professor Munene, thanks once again for speaking to us. Let me just first get your impressions of how you think the day went, and we'll get to the disruptions and the source of them in just a moment, but just your general sense of was it a conducive environment for a free and fair election?
Thank you. The day has been interesting in the sense that the voter turnout was low, not as high as expected. There appears to be a lot of apathy, disillusionment. So in the early part of the day, the morning, there was general low interest. But something happened in some constituencies that in the afternoon, late afternoon, people showed up to try to catch up and do their part before the closing time. But generally, the turnout was very low, and that might affect the outcome because of the numbers that would be affected. So depending on where one is sitting, there are those, the low turnout would affect them negatively, and the ones that are likely to benefit from that. Generally, it was a disappointment in terms of the turnout.
And the turnout, correct me if I'm wrong, the figures put it at just a little over 6 million by midday, which is roughly about 30% of the registered population. What do you think eventually it will turn out to be? And you mentioned voter apathy. Was that the only reason why the turnout was low?
Well, it is possible that the eventual figure will be between 10 and 12 million voters. It's very likely, but even then that will still be very low because it will be barely over or about half of the registered number of voters. The reason, I think, for the low turnout is that it is a protest. There is a general national protest, and as a result of disillusionment, so people are expressing themselves by not showing up, except where they think that they have serious agenda to address. They are going to be voting against somebody. Then they try to come out in big numbers to vote against somebody rather than for. So the vote for is not as high as the vote against somebody or some places. And that explains this. So the protest, which appears to be the case, is very high, which means that people are not happy with the way the country has been, the cost of living, the running of the affairs of state, the impression that leaders are not reliable because they sometimes keep on changing their mind. So what comes up is, can you trust these people? Can you trust what they say? And what you have is an overwhelming expression of protest that things are not quite right. And so people wonder why they should wake up, why they should travel to go and vote in some place when they are not sure that the winners would care about them afterwards. Because that has happened before. They promise everything, and once they are in, they tend to forget. So people feel cheated. And because they feel cheated, then they see no point in going to vote.
Part of what electoral observers look at is the preparedness of the electoral system itself. We heard that the voter identification system had to switch to manual because it didn't work electronically, and that some people actually left the voting lines because of this. I mean, how does this affect the overall viewpoint of how prepared the Electoral Commission was, and the system itself, whether it was prepared to deal with those that were there to exercise their constitutional right. But precisely given the fact that now we have 6 constituencies that have had their votes suspended.
Well, I will not quarrel with the equipment because they seem to work pretty well. And when the bio gadget has a problem, there was always the manual register to turn to. So the issue is not so much the bio and the register, because that will not stop people from going to vote. It is that they had a feeling that it is not worth it. Then you have small issues like opening the stations late and 1 or 2 people being suspected of malpractice. There have been accusations of that. There was little violence in the coast in Mombasa, which needs to be dealt with. Of course, the IBC did not instill a lot of confidence when it had to cancel elections for governors in at least 2 major counties, and the explanations given was that the printers made mistakes. And so you wonder, is that the incompetence where it is coming from? Is it on the part of the IBC or the printer? Somebody made a big mistake somewhere. And the cost to the voters and the candidates by cancelling that is just immense, and people are not very happy about it. So some of them might just stay out. If they were going to vote for governor and then they have no chance to do it, they might wonder whether they should go and vote for the other candidates in the other positions. So the voting machines and equipment are really not the issue here, although they might discourage a few people. It is the impression created by the IBC that it might be floundering rather than being...
Okay. Professor Munene, we are running out of time.
I think up to today they've done well.
I need to ask this question. There were some areas that did well in terms of voter turnout. There are areas that had poorer voter turnout. And based on these areas, do you anticipate a runoff?
There is a high possibility that none of the candidates will get a 50% plus 1, although that's supposition. And if that happens, then there will be a runoff. Right now, the 2 leading candidates are neck and neck. And but then we are in the preliminary stages of receiving results. So by the time we have a lot of them, then it might be very clear which side is going to be winning. But it does look as if somebody might sweep. But we cannot say for sure that it will be the case. The assumption that there will be a runoff is based on the possibility of one of the 2 minor candidates taking a lot of votes from the big one, the 2 big ones who are seeming to be neck and neck. That does not seem to be happening at present. So if that trend continues, there will be no runoff. But should any of the 2 candidates surge forward in the next day or so, enough to deny both candidates the 50%, then there will be a runoff.
All right, thank you so much for your time and keeping us up to speed on the latest in terms of the elections in Kenya. Of course, counting is underway. It's said that by early morning South African time, there should be some indication of who is in the lead, if at all. As you heard Professor Munene there saying that very tightly run race.